Well, hi everyone, and welcome to Millennials of Tokyo's live event today. This is John from Millennials of Tokyo. Today's event is around the Tokyo music stream, music scene rather, the Tokyo live music stream scene. And my co-host is Nina from Half Ladies. Nina, do you want to say a quick hello?
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be back co-hosting another event with John. My name is Nina. I am the founder of Hafu Ladies, and also this topic of music is really close to heart for me because I also DJ in Tokyo and I'm in a band, The Ocean and I. Little shout out. So we haven't been able to play a show since March, so I know how that feels. So it's very interesting to be able to talk about this with our guest speakers today and for everyone to hear. Thank you for having me.
That's great. Thank you, Nina. Today we're joined by Josh, who is the founder of a music and events platform called Zyko. We're also joined by Matt, who is the founder of a alternative music platform called Kaala. And we will be joined shortly by Ken, who is a DJ with a focus on Afrobeats. So just a quick heads up about today. If you have any burning questions, try and feed them to us via Facebook. We were going to be going on to YouTube as well today, but we're having some technical issues with that. But not to worry, this event will be archived both on Facebook and on YouTube. But if you have any questions, feel free to send it to us via either Millennials of Tokyo Instagram DMs, or ideally via the live chat function on Facebook or via Facebook. So we have people monitoring both Facebook and Instagram. To begin, we're going to speak with Josh, who, as I just mentioned, is the founder of an awesome events and ticketing service called Zyko here in Japan. Um, Josh, can you give us a quick intro into Zyko and what it does?
Sure. I'm sorry if there's background noise. I'm at the office, even though it doesn't look like it from my background. So Zyko started 2 years ago in 2019, but it really started before that. We came from a media company. Well, we were a technology company, 77 Hertz, that owned a media company called iFlyer, which some of you might be familiar with. And iFlyer, when we were making the iFlyer platform, we had a lot of technology that, because we're very well known for the clubbing scene, we really couldn't expand out of that. Even though we built the first apps for Fuji Rock and Summer Sonic, we were still known for being a clubbing site. So we decided to separate the technology and the media into two different companies. And in 2019, we raised some funds and built Zyko as a white label ticketing platform with the go-to-market strategy to work with all of the media companies that we knew to allow them to sell tickets under their own brands for the events that they were already promoting. That was going really well until COVID hit. COVID hit like a hammer, shut everything down, and we really recognized early on how this was going to affect everyone's business. So within 4 days, we built a paid live streaming platform that we talked to a lot of the artists that had their events canceled. And the very first artist that agreed to this was an artist named Sero, Japanese artist named Sero, who had their event canceled in 2019 during the typhoon season, where it wiped out a lot of events in October, November, September of that year. And they rescheduled in early March, and then COVID hit. And they'd sold probably 400 tickets. And Sero is very much a band's band. The bands love them because they play a certain type of music. They expected to sell 400, 500 tickets, and we sold 6,000 tickets. And that from that point, and they did a great production job for that. We got a lot of publicity. We got a lot of bands writing into us because they knew that they couldn't do their shows. And since March, we've done over 5,000 stream shows. And we've returned over 26 million US dollars to artists in that time. So we've expanded our business enormously. And the key that we did differently, I can talk a lot about what our products are and all this kind of stuff, but I think
Josh,
one of the most...
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Can I just finish that?
Yeah, one of the most important things about this situation and what we did was early on, we set up that it was important for fans to pay for the music they were watching. And that didn't happen in other places around the world, which I can get into, and the struggles that artists are having in the US and in Europe and so on and so forth with free events. But I'll let Matt introduce himself and all of that.
No, we will get into that later on. But just before we move on to Nina and then Matt, just to give some context. So Zyco, what are some of the most well-known rival companies in Japan, for example?
There are a few. Since we started, the big ticketing companies, E+ and PIA, have created streaming. There are some older companies, Ichichinama, that did one, and there are a few that are on that are well known, but they're more specific to certain genres. But the big ones now are us and PIA and E+. So Lawson, the company, the convenience store company, works with us exclusively. So we do all of Lawson's events. So any Lawson ticket is Zyco. And that means that we're in the big leagues with everybody.
And you guys work with all kinds of scales, from individuals to small companies to large corporations large,
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Nina, would you like to introduce our next speaker?
Yes, absolutely. Can I ask Josh one other question?
Yes.
Are we? I'm wondering what differentiates you guys from the other platforms that do the live streaming nowadays.
That's a great question. One thing that is important is we built our own technology. So the other platforms are using Vimeo or other services. We've built our own IP around that. We also are multilingual. We have 6 languages that we support. And we also are very proactive at international fans. We accept international credit cards. We promote artists overseas. No one else does that. They're very inwardly focused inside of Japan, because Japan is the second biggest music market in the world. It's one of the greatest things here is that, but it's also very difficult for people to understand that there's a market outside of Japan. There's enough meat on the bone here, as it were. So they don't accept credit cards. I mean, there's Line Live as well. They don't accept credit cards from overseas. They don't do support in English or any other language, and we do. So that's really a differentiator.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Cool.
All right, moving on to our next speaker, Matt. Thank you for joining us today. And Matt is the founder of Kaala. So do you want to tell us about that, and maybe a little bit about your development of vacant properties outside in the Inaka area, or whatever you'd like to say, go ahead.
I'll be getting into that later. So Kaala, a little bit about, I've been in independent underground, what I call extreme music, and that used to be just like hardcore and death metal and stuff. But over the years, I've kind of just realized that extreme, at least for me, is more or less just like, is it from the heart? So it's sort of outside of genre at this point. But we do a lot of work with death metal, black metal, grindcore, things like this. And I've been performing in Japan's underground scene as a guitarist for about 12 years or so now. And through that process, as a band member, as somebody who booked shows, as a tour manager, as somebody who kind of did all of this stuff in what is an aggressively DIY kind of community and scene, both for better and for worse. After a number of years doing that, you kind of realize all of the fail points, and there's a lot of them in that type of DIY environment. And really it's kind of to the detriment of the scene as a whole. And so around 2015, the kind of our first step was to start databasing and collating information regarding venues, bands, events, infrastructure, labels, and we almost got to audiences, but we didn't get that far. But anyway, with all that information, big data as it were, we started being able to kind of get analytics out of that. So, you know, if you're a death metal band who wants to play in the first week of August at some place in Shinjuku, what is open? What bands are willing to play with you? How much should you charge? How many people can you expect? This, that, and the other thing. We didn't get as far as predictive, but we got pretty good at being able to call the shots on what was, you know, maybe not the right, but maybe the best thing to do. From that, we ended up also determining that, I mean, we produced a nationwide map of what the underground aggressive music scene in Japan looks like. We work with a little over 3,000 bands, Japanese bands, not international. Like the underground, the scene is very large. It's just also very invisible. We've got, I think it's 825 venues in 46 of 47 prefectures. Akita is the only one that I'm sure it exists, we just haven't found it yet. So we've got that, 77 some labels, blah, 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 blah. And with that information, we also ended up determining that we had a really good way of basically making a music tourism company. So one thing that we're very, very passionate about, and this is kind of regardless of genre, but the fact that in Japan, I mean, really J-pop is kind of maybe a little bit of math rock, but J-pop is the name of Japanese music worldwide. And that is a huge disservice to all of the various other types of music that might not be as large, but are still, you know, nationwide communities, right? And so why aren't they getting kind of any attention? So that was kind of our goal with the data stuff. And then with the tourism thing, we ended up establishing a company over in Seattle, Washington, in order to start getting US and Canadian citizens over to Japan to experience the underground heavy metal scene. On top of that, we also started a record label. We still have that going. It's a record label. It's super slow and all that stuff. And so let's see, bands I've played in are Crack and Strike. That's a super old one that nobody's ever heard of. Following that was Darkcorpse. Following that was Retch. And currently I'm in a band called Worship Pain. And the last concert we played was, I was a little bit wrong in the lead up in our kind of test thing. I think it was on March 2nd that we had our last show. And that's, again, when kind of the hammer came down and everything broke. And I mean, every genre, every scene, I don't care how big or how small you are, like it is broken, but oh my God, the sheer destruction that has happened in independent underground DIY kind of unpopular music, I've never seen anything like it. Of course, you know, it's in Japanese, the nakiwarai, right? Nobody's kind of letting on to how bad things are, but it's bad. I mean, it is devastatingly bad. And so for a minute we were, I mean, kind of up shit creek, like without a paddle, you know what I mean? And then I've known Josh for quite some time, and we've been talking, and we were using Zyko prior to Corona, but like, you know, kind of the stars lined and everything. And that ended up becoming kind of, you know, a stopgap at the very least of, you know, what can we do? How can we raise some funds for the venues specifically? The bands generally are, you know, comparatively well off, but the venues, their bread and butter is having events, and basically they can't anymore. They definitely can't have profitable ones, right? It's next to, if not actually impossible. And so there's that. And then I also run another company called Akia and Inaka, which is a real estate firm that specializes in abandoned houses in the middle of nowhere, Japan, which I could talk for hours about, but the way that intersects with what we do with Kaala is, while I'm a huge fan of streaming and digital distribution and, you know, technology in general, as you might be able to tell by my background, you know, if I can't get into a circle pit and jump off the stage and be covered in beer and sweat and blood from, you know, my brothers and sisters in the audience, right? Like that's like, I need that. We need that. We all need that. And so something that I'm very, very curious about, in addition to sort of the direct and also nascent opportunities that Zyko provides, is what, if any, right, are the alternative methods of kind of physical organization of music scenes that are at least conceivable, if not possible, right? And so what we're looking at right now, and in fact up in Nikko, in Tochigi Prefecture, we've already carted some PAs and amps and did a sound check up at an abandoned house. Well, it was an abandoned house, and then somebody bought it and, you know, kind of fixed it up in the middle of nowhere, right? And so kind of our hypothesis at the moment anyway is, you know, extremely heavy logistical lift notwithstanding, it might be conceivable that, you know, if you can cart small groups of individuals out, and I'm talking like 20 or 25, out to, you know, a house in the middle of nowhere that's surrounded by forests in the mountains, that has no problem with kind of sound pollution and things like that. If you can get PCR testing involved, if you can get, you know, vans with the windows open, and I mean, various other things, like, is it possible to maybe not recreate the type of audiences and concerts that, you know, we previously had, but at least, you know, approximate anyway, kind of the, you know, the joy, really, the celebration of life, as it were, that, you know, the music experience provides. I think there's a very big differentiation that needs to be made between the actual performance of music, be it live or not, and the kind of what I call like the visceral experience that accompanies that. And, you know, that might be getting a beer at the bar with, you know, your favorite band, or meeting, you know, or getting booted in the face. I know I've broken my nose a few times at concerts. Like these are all things that color the experience that is music. It's not just the music itself, right? And so that's the thing that I'm kind of chasing after right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And as a fellow music lover, I totally know what you mean. You know, we all definitely miss going to live shows. That is just that specific experience that you can't get from a screen, even if you do love watching musicians do their thing on stage on your screen. So you're doing a lot, and it's so cool to hear everything. Thank you so much. All right, so back to John so we can introduce our final guest speaker.
Actually, before we move on to Ken, who's just joined us, awesome. Matt, quick question. So basically you have two platforms. One, Kaala, which is a kind of platform where musicians can find spaces that are available in the city. Is that right?
That's one way to look at it.
And then, so venues, post their calendars, and bands can search the calendar and find a slot to play. Right.
It's, I mean, one of really the bare bones kind of I don't know if I call it a service, but let's call it a service that we offer is, if you've ever booked a show, especially in independent or underground venues, like really the only recourse you have is to make a bunch of phone calls without knowing anything at all.
Right.
And just saying, oh, how about this date? And then they say no, and then, oh, okay, maybe next time. Then you call somebody else, and you call somebody else, and you call somebody else.
Yeah, I think it's important. Can I jump in for a second, if you don't mind, to understand what the live house's job is. There, a lot of the live houses, and there are thousands of them. I mean, this is something that a lot of people don't see. It's a hidden world, just like the clubs, but live houses in particular, there are a lot, and they're businesses of passion by usually a single or two people. They're not chains. They have a specific music that they cater to, and they're also just boxes for the most part, meaning that it's pay to play in Japan for most small artists, where you rent the space and you have to make that money back by selling tickets to your show, and each individual band or artist is responsible for their amount of that box payment. And this is why the live houses have had such a traumatic downturn, is that a lot of the live houses, not all, but a lot of the live houses don't have any connection really to people. Now, there are some that are specific about certain music, and Matt knows those, and some of the larger live houses in Shimikizawa and Koenji and so on and so forth, that everybody knows and wants to support. But generally the bands, they want to play at a certain place, but it's just a box. So those boxes, you know, they really suffer because who are they going to bring in? And it's just ugly how it turned out. What do you think about that, Matt?
Yeah, and I mean, we deal predominantly with those venues that have their very specific kind of niche, right?
Yeah.
And so and because of that, right, it's a matter of, you know, who's booked on what day, and there's no database anywhere that tells you just what are the openings on a given date. And so the only way prior to what we're still trying to build is literally to just make a bunch of phone calls, and it's hit or miss, and you waste hours, if not days, trying to do that. Whereas if you can just look at a schedule that says on this day, these venues in that area are open, these ones are already booked, here are their phone numbers or email addresses, suddenly you're saving, again, hours, if not days, right? So that's definitely something that the Kaala service aims to provide.
I see. That's incredible because I mean, I know like in the startup space, you have things like Space Market and Spacey.
Yeah.
These apps where if you're trying to find a room for a meeting, you can just look up any available meeting room in the neighborhood that you're in any company.
There is no Space Market for brutal death metal.
There isn't, but you're building that, right?
Yeah, that's one of our many aims.
Okay, that's very useful. Next, so Ken's just joined us. Ken, thank you so much. We really appreciate this. So Ken, we've just spoken to Joshua and Matt, who've talked about their sort of brief background. Can you say something about yourself? So I mean, you're a DJ from the US, but you've played really around the world, haven't you?
Yes. So I'm also in the military as well. Mm-hmm. So I've used the fact in the military that we travel different places to use that as an opportunity to travel different places and play at different venues around the world. When I started in Japan. I wasn't into Afrobeat as I am now. Once traveling to Bahrain, that's when I was introduced to the Afrobeat vibe. And then remembering my time in Japan, there was no Afrobeat scene. So just to make it very brief, I just took what I saw in Afro Bahrain and just copy and pasted and brought it to Japan. And I saw that a lot of people were loving it, vibing to it. And then, as everybody knows, when COVID came, pretty much the first industry to go was the entertainment industry to go. And it went quick. Looking at alternatives, thinking about it, it seems everything's going digital now. As you can see right now, we're doing the Zoom meet. As I see VR progress, I could see potential VR parties becoming the norm, as they're telling people to stay indoors. VR seems to be the outlet where I'm thinking about. So, because for example, right now the military in Japan, we're restricted to certain areas we can go. So, like for example, I can't go to Tokyo and do events like that. People still ask for the events, but due to my current occupation, I can't do it. But all in all, thinking of alternative routes, that's the best one I can see thus far, is VR.
This might be a slightly silly question, but actually two silly questions. One, can you just say something about Afrobeat for those who don't know what that is?
Okay.
And also, do they have like venues? I guess they do on bases, and what's going on with those venues?
Okay, so on base there is a club that they have, but since the whole lockdown thing hasn't been open since.
Right.
Afrobeat is, you could say it's African hip hop, not hip hop in the sense of what you think, but it's African themed. And it's a very unique beat, very popular, very well known to those who subscribe to it. What was funny is when we was doing events in Tokyo, like speakers were able to be heard outside on the streets. So even though Japanese people walk by, I never heard it before, but they was tuned into it. Like it was right there at the crosswalk. So there'd be times where they, turn around and we try to get them to come in, but they like to dance to it. But Afrobeats is very, very popular. Very, it's more of a field thing. I wish I could put more in words, but Yeah. So with that, let me see.
Actually, I was going to say that, we were talking about, streaming generally taking over the music industry compared to, say, downloads or, in-person concerts even, or definitely CDs. And since COVID, if you look at the numbers, I think Deloitte did a report sometime during the summer on how, streaming as a service in I think the US alone is something about, $13 billion industry a year. Streaming has really shot. I think the success of what would have been niche genres like Afrobeat 10 years ago, because of things like YouTube, because of things like Spotify and Tidal and other streaming services, you can have what is a sub-Saharan, mostly Western and Southern and Eastern African phenomena, where things like YouTube is now a global phenomena, right? And I think we can expect more and more regions of the world to really, in the same way that, Korean music, for example, K-pop has spread around Asia and the world, Afrobeat, spreading around the world because of streaming largely. We can expect, different regions of the world with their very unique forms of music to be able to conquer other parts of the world. But so you were saying that as a DJ in Tokyo, when COVID hit, everything pretty much ground to a halt.
Yes. The place that we actually previously used to play the Afrobeat events at actually closed down.
Oh, really?
So the nightlife industry got hit hard with this whole thing. Music industry, entertainment industry in general was the one that got hit hard because it requires people to physically be there to engage and be social. So once social distancing and all this stuff came into place, those were the first to go.
For those who don't know, a few months ago, Millennials of Tokyo, together with Ken and one of our DJ friends, Jesse, we did an experimental live streaming mini concert inside Jesse's apartment. And what we did was we had Jesse and Ken both playing. We had a couple of live artists using the music that was being played to inspire some live art. And we very quickly, as we were setting up, ran into several problems. One was that initially we thought about live streaming via Instagram, but then we decided not to do that. Partly for the same reason as our next idea, which was to live stream to YouTube. And that was that we were afraid that the IG and YouTube algorithm would be able to take us down if we played any copyrighted material. The solution that we found at the time, after tinkering around for a bit, was to let Jesse and Ken, play some music via Google Meets, which was not ideal, but we managed to pipe the music through to a couple of listening audiences, members. But that's just one very kind of like, low key or low bandwidth non-solution really that we played around with. But if we could just turn back to Josh. So
Yes.
Josh, as the so-called corporate among us here,
Ouch.
what are some of the sort of solutions that your company and perhaps other companies are providing artists like Matt, like Nina, like Ken, who cannot do in-person events? What are you providing as an industry, and generally, what's happening in the industry when it comes to live streaming, an industry that seems to be of its time right now with social distancing?
Right. I think there are a few parts to this. One is that what we're seeing with live streaming is it's really direct to fan. We hear direct to consumer often for businesses, but this is direct to fan, meaning that the owners of the product, which is the artists themselves, have a really strong way to connect directly with fans globally. There's no IP or there's no geofencing for what we're seeing. So there is a global audience that's possible, and growing that is very important. That's what streaming is giving us. The issues, I think, globally outside of Japan is the difference between having a paid live stream event where the fans understand that, hopefully understand that nowadays, to be an artist, your income is directly related to how often you play live, because the streaming services like Spotify or Apple Music or whatever have destroyed the CD or record purchasing industry, and artists don't make that much money from that. So really where they make money is from their live events. And what happens in Japan is that we set up at the very beginning that there's value to an artist playing. And if you're a fan, that direct to fan connection, that they want to make sure that the artist stuck around. And this does go over into live houses as well. There are live houses that use our service as their brand to keep themselves going. But when you look globally, you look at the US and Europe, you see that artists, probably rightfully so, started to do free events online through Facebook and Twitch and Instagram Live and all of these places where they were doing pretty low quality in their bedroom streams to give back during the COVID times. And this caused two issues. One, people got used to free. And the artists weren't thinking clearly when they were doing this, because nothing is free. They were using platforms that were monetizing their content. Those platforms make a lot of money on advertising that they were not getting back themselves. And COVID lasts a lot longer than anybody thought. So we're at a situation in especially Europe and the US where it's difficult to get people to pay for content now because it was given away for free first. So there has to be a re-education for the consumer in these markets that says it's valuable to pay for something in order to keep it going. I read an article that said that 80 to 90% of working musicians in the UK will never be able to play again and get paid because this just ruined the market for them. They can't go back to it. They were making a living, scraping by doing this, but now they've had to move on to other things. And it's very sad. And I think that's true for DJs as well as artists themselves. A lot of them have given up because they just can't continue and their life has moved on. Are the fans going to come back? Can they wait? It's the next generation and so on and so forth. So there really has to be from the artist. It can't be a platform like myself, like what I do, that says this is important. It has to be directly from the artist that says, look, if you want me to continue, I need you to help us by paying for content. And that direct to fan connection will work, but there has been a hesitation abroad to make that decision. And part of that is because the music industry is a mess with promoters and managers and all this stuff that want to keep business the way it was, but it's not the way it was. So I think
without being facetious, OnlyFans is not a solution.
OnlyFans, OnlyFans is a very different type of model, but yes, I mean that is, there's Patreon and even how Twitch does. You subscribe to the people you want to watch. It's not an unknown scenario, but just the music industry itself has been slow to catch on to this.
Is that to do with, as you were saying, with like bandwidth issues or the technology itself? I mean, it's one thing to go to an OnlyFans and see somebody stripping or dancing on a pole. You don't need high fidelity for that. Whereas, is there something specific about music itself and the technology behind streaming that makes it something that requires?
I mean, there are huge technology challenges behind the scenes to build something that can handle 100,000 people, 1 million people. BTS just did an event that they sold 1 million tickets to. That was a stream event for $100 each, and you can imagine that's an incredible amount of money. And it's possible to do all of these things. But the technology challenges are real. But from the artist's point of view, I mean, I can talk about the technology challenges that we've had, and scaling of any amount. You can imagine 100,000 people coming, if you're any technology people out there, coming to hit a server all within 3 seconds. It's crazy amount of technology you have to build. But from the point of view of the artist, you need to think about what your fans are willing to pay for. So what we've seen is creating good content, creating a nice, pay a little bit of money to do a good video so that people feel like they're getting value for what they're paying for. The other thing with streaming is, we do an archive time, which is very popular with our fans, so that they can watch, video on demand, watch it again, watch it in the time when they can. They can watch it live, of course, but the rewatchability is a big positive for this as well.
Actually, Josh, can I jump in and talk about that?
Yes.
The archive thing for a bit. So we've done I think 8 streams on Zyko. Great platform. Thank you very much for building that. And something that I just kind of came to the conclusion of was, I think we've been marketing it wrong. And by we, I mean Kaala, in that we've been treating it as, oh, it's an event that happens at this time, and that's when you should tune in. But there's also a 2-week thing. So if you want to do that, that's cool, but be here at this time. And really, that's not what our fans, we get a lot of people saying, oh, I really want to watch that, but shit, I'm still at work at 8 p.m. on Thursday. And so I think what kind of from an education process of education for us that we've realized is, and I feel kind of dumb saying this, I should have realized it earlier, is that these are not live concert events that we're talking. It's streaming, which is a different type of consumption than an actual live concert event is.
Actually, just riffing on that, Ken, the difference between, so as a DJ, actually, there's who's the super famous guy on Facebook who DJs and live streams it, and he has 100,000 or 300,000 people watching him. His name is Casey.
Does he wear a bathrobe?
Yeah, he does.
Okay, goofy. I forgot his name, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so he's at home wearing his bathrobe, wearing glasses, a kind of nerdy looking DJ, but he live stream these DJ things, and he just gets hundreds of thousands of views. In your case, Ken, is it important for you to, I suppose it is, to be live in the venue, feeling the crowd?
It is you could say it's almost like a spiritual connection, like having the people physically there, and you feeling their energy and they feeling yours, and once y'all sync up like Bluetooth, when you play the next song, they're gonna rock to it. Playing it live, unless you've been doing it like that guy has, and that's your niche.
And he's communicating with people. People are calling in. They're sending him messages. And he's reading their messages out. He's very interactive in that sense. Although he's playing from his own apartment, I guess.
For him, it was more of a. It wasn't reactive. For example, he didn't start that when COVID started,
right?
Like most DJs did. It was a proactive sense. He did that prior to it, so he had already had the following. So during COVID, nothing changed for him in the sense of, he's just put the camera on and do what he's always been doing. And he already been building and growing the following. Whereas now you have DJs doing it in their house or in their corner who've been doing it at live events. So you don't even have the following, you're just doing it to, essentially use it to stay relevant.
And Dan, have you played any remote DJing sessions? And how
outside of the one we did? No, I haven't done it.
Would you do it if you are on Zyko, for example, using the Zyko live streaming service?
Yeah, if I saw a demand for it or a push towards it, I would definitely do it or try it out just to test the water. Nothing wrong with trying something out.
Now, Nina, I know you're a co-host, but you're also part of a band, aren't you? have you guys done anything remotely? Are you talking about it? Is it on the agenda?
We actually, at the beginning of the pandemic, we actually did some like alone, like recording each of us in our house, like playing our part, and then put it together and put it on our Instagram.
Ooh.
So yeah, we did a little bit of that.
was
Our
that?
drum, it was pretty cool. We've all kind of been doing our own thing since then. So, yeah, definitely miss the energy that we have when we're all together collaborating and in the same space. But it is cool that we can still stay connected and together and to like be interacting with our fans even while we're all apart and not able to be in the same room. So I think I definitely saw a lot of that from other bands as well. Our drummer is in another band who did that also. And then they, when it started to ease up a little bit, like him and his other bandmates would get together and do like live streams on Instagram. And I definitely saw a lot of that from musicians, especially in the beginning, right? Like like I think Josh was saying, is like live streaming on Instagram and whatnot for people to see. And I think it is a good way to really stay connected with one another and with the band themselves as well. Yeah, but it's hard when it's like one way. Like we see the comments from people coming in and such, but it is definitely different from feeling the crowd, like Ken is saying and Matt is nodding at.
Well, one of the interesting things that we've discovered, so we use, for the streams that we produce, we're using we're going to the live houses, right? Because they have all the gear and, you know, they're part of the community and it's not just some rental studio. And so we raise cash for them, right? But I think, Ken, it was super important that you brought up, you know, having the audience there is really of the utmost importance. And what we're seeing, which is actually really fun and frequently funny, is so number one, most of these bands are totally not used to being filmed, right? They're at a venue and they're playing live, which feels like a concert, yet there's that one conspicuous element that's missing, which is the actual audience. So they kind of don't know what to do with that, and it's like kind of awkward. And so we end up capturing these really human, it's almost like Curb Your Enthusiasm, but focused around a musical performance. It's almost like a sitcom that we end up recording. It's the performance itself, but then also the artists as well, kind of figuring out like, wait a minute, what are we doing here? How do we, like, are we supposed to keep going? Like, what do we do? And so I think that element of that actually is, I mean, it's unfortunate the audience isn't there, of course, but at the same time, I think it's also a really neat development in content production around music. Like, I haven't seen that before.
I have have you guys been ever at a Speakeasy Tokyo event? Because when the pandemic started, they moved their events to Zoom, but instead of it being like just the DJ on the Zoom, they had all the little boxes of people. So the DJ would be playing, and then every few seconds, like there'll be like someone different on the screen, and you can just watch them dancing around. And I'm sure like that's
cool.
like kind of like nerve-wracking to some people, but it was really cool to be able to see that and people just getting into the groove and still being part of that on Zoom together, basically.
It sounds like chat roulette, but with music.
Basically.
We've seen some of that. We've done a lot of music festivals actually that have gone digital that had some really cool cutaways for people dancing on their own, like Rainbow Disco Club and stuff like that. I also think that there's an opportunity to really think outside the box on what opportunities this could provide. I know we've talked to Kaala and Matt about, you know, doing cross-border events with artists from different places playing on the same bill, you know, or DJs from different countries playing together that would never have a chance to do that, where people could watch. That kind of stuff is super exciting to me, where, you know, the different places watching different music and different artists at the same time. It is a little bit challenging, but these are the kinds of things that people are thinking about now. Some of the bigger artists are releasing content by time zone. So an event right now by Dua Lipa is she's releasing it time zone by time zone, the same content. So people are watching it at the same time of night. So people don't have to wake up at 6 in the morning or something like that. There's also the possibility, and what we think internally is going to happen, is that live streaming will stay, events will come back, and it will be an add-on that people buy that go to the event and want to experience it again the next day, so that they get to see the same, songs that they saw live. I certainly would do that. Or if you're following a tour, you watch the tour in Tokyo, and then you buy the rest of the tour to watch online to see if they're playing any other, songs on their set. This kind of stuff will become popular, I think.
Oh yeah.
Going back, yeah. Go ahead, Matt.
On top of that, I'm pretty sure we've talked about this before, but just to sort of reiterate, the thing that we're, well, maybe not the thing that we're most focused on, but one of the many things that we're very focused on is with the underground venues. So number one, frequently they have dreadful, if at all existent, kind of IT infrastructure, meaning Wi-Fi and internet connections. Right. And so number one, that gets into the way of actual live streaming, like Dolce Hosel, right? And so, and I won't even get into the linguistic complexities of live stream and two language and whatever. And so we necessarily have to film, and then in post we get to edit, which is, a good thing in one sense, but we are relatively restricted with the underground venues of doing actual proper simultaneous broadcasts, right? Just because the infrastructure isn't there. And so during coronavirus, that's, problematic for a few reasons. But as Josh was kind of saying, if and, when events come back, there's immense added value that if you just spend, $500 on a proper router and getting it set up correctly, and 2 or 3 GoPros and a few mics, right? So let's call it like $2,500, $3,000, and you're a venue that only fits 50 people, you can sell that out without that. If you sell out, you're at 50 people and that's your max cap and you can't make anything on top of that. But, with like a spot out in Yokohama that we work with quite frequently and has a massive following, specifically in California, suddenly you can start charging, $5, whatever, for a live stream from that place. So on top of selling out at 50 people for, 2,000 yen per ticket, so you're at 100,000 yen, you can also tack on however many more people log in for really not very much at all.
I think that's what I was kind of, the point I was trying to make earlier on about how Afrobeats has emerged from, let's say obscure parts of Africa to kind of colonize a huge part of the world, is that it could be Afrobeat, it could be the alternative music scene in Japan. I mean, Matt, just to what you were saying earlier on about how this genre in Japan has been somewhat hidden, right? And yet, there are probably hundreds of these bands spread around Japan. I remember when I was in London before I came to Japan, there was a Japanese band called Envy.
Yeah, I know those guys.
Right, and I just happened upon it on YouTube so randomly when I was still in London. But a year or two later, when I moved to Japan, on the plane on the way up, I met this other guy, a British guy, who was also into Envy. And we were almost like, it was almost kind of like a mini brotherhood that sort of happened right there and then. We were like, oh my God, I can't believe you also know this like fairly obscure Japanese band. But now, with digitization, you can have like obscure bands from anywhere in the world, right?
Yeah.
With the potential to reach massive, so-called massive but exclusive audiences around the world. If you're a tiny band playing in Ebisu somewhere, in the alternative music scene, but you have 100,000 followers spread around the planet, then suddenly you have a viable band.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
let me comment on the brotherhood thing, right? Like the Japanese scene here, and again, I think I'm guessing most of our viewers probably in Japan, but most genres, it's just, everything from everywhere.
Matt, can I just repeat that? I missed the beginning of that sentence.
Oh yeah, and so that's I think the brotherhood thing that you mentioned, in Japan, I'm part of the heavy metal scene, but I'm sure it's with all other scenes, right? In a country that's, relatively like, it's Japan, it's an island nation, and it's like 97% Japanese, right? But if you go to shows, be it heavy metal, be it jazz, be it hip hop, be it noise, be it EDM, whatever, right? You suddenly get this incredibly diverse and international microcosm that exists within that scene that kind of is always moving and morphing and kind of changing as it goes, right? And so I think that with digitization, that can only help.
Yeah.
Right? That can only push that sort of what do you call it, mission or positive development or whatever you want to call it. It can only
exactly.
help.
It's exactly the same with Envy. I remember going to some concert hall in Shibuya, probably Shibuya X or something, maybe 10 years ago to see Envy, and I was thinking I was going to be the only foreigner in there, but I think a good 33% of the audience was, foreigners, and we'd all kind of like individually found Envy in the ether.
Right.
But going back to what Ken said earlier on about virtual reality and how he's excited about that, can you just each sort of touch on the possibilities that VR offers? I remember there's a kind of creative agency in Tokyo called Party, like Party, and Party did
a great name.
Yeah, they did an online sort of virtual reality concert. So basically, it's an app that you download, and you basically log in with your name, and when you join the virtual concert, you have this like avatar that you can like move around as though you were in a video game. And during this virtual concert, which is like by the seaside, let's say, you had like the beach, you had like the sea, obviously you had like and sort of the beach area with some branding by Red Bull, I think, and other companies. You had a sort of digital DJ booth with a sort of avatar playing, and your own avatar would have your name. Mine had my name just above my head, but I could see other people who joined the concert. Like there's a Matt character running around over there, there's a Ken character over here, a Nina character over there, and so they had DJs playing, they had actual virtual bands, avatars of bands playing, and I could move my own character behind the stage onto the DJ booth. I could mingle with the sort of the performing artists as they came on one after the other. And in a weird way, I mean, I was sitting at home doing all this. It was oddly engaging, to attend this virtual concert, sort of virtual reality concert. And I wasn't even wearing any kind of, virtual reality headset, which I think could make the experience sort of XD, right? The so-called XD experiences with all your 4 senses or 5 senses engaged. What are your thoughts on, virtual concerts? We'll begin with Josh and move our way on.
Virtual reality or any new technology has challenges to who's watching. There have been some very successful VR, especially within Fortnite. I think everybody's seen Travis Scott or Marshmello do for millions and millions of people, and that costs a lot of money to make. It was successful. Fortnite did it, because they wanted new users to come in, and people seem to have a good time. There have been some EDM festivals that have done some pretty amazing virtual events. And at this point, it's one way to showcase an event. There are a lot of different industries now. Like you mentioned Party, there's another agency here called Naked that's also thinking about doing something like that, and creating that sort of virtual experience. And there's also, so there are the people that like that. And I think that skews very young, and an older audience would totally hate that. They don't want a virtual experience. They want to see the artist as they are. And sometimes there's a mesh of the two things. So you have some virtual stage versus, the real stage. So I think it's really the video game generation where they like that kind of interaction and inclusion. And then there's the older generation, or the really otaku people that don't want that, the idol fans. They want to focus in on, if you're looking at like new technologies, I would say 5G is the biggest upgrade, because you're going to be able to single out band members and focus just on them. You'll have multi-camera displays more than VR. I think this is where the future is, because I'm a drummer. I want to watch the drummer only, or one band member or guitarist, or, from different camera angles, and you are the director. That stuff I think is probably going to be a bigger change, and that's a technology that's coming with 5G. That's my take on it.
Ken, thoughts on that?
Yeah, so with the whole VR thing, I like what you said with the whole XD, because once you're able to immerse the two senses, the sight and the hearing, you're there. And that's the two elements that's taken away, is being able to see. Now, as like you said, as technology actually advances, I see it going to a point to where it scans your face and it makes an avatar based off of what you actually look like.
Right.
And then you can engage with the people as if you was physically there. You have the headset, and then you have something to cover your eyes, and the earphones, and then you feel like you're actually there. But yeah, as things continue to progress, I see it going that way. If COVID is not lifted, alternative ways, we always find a way. No matter what obstacles come, mankind, we always find a way to, accomplish whatever it is we want to. It could be VR or AR. You see, remember when Pokemon Go came out, and you can walk in real life and catch a Pokemon, and for a while that was very big for everybody. Even if you didn't know Pokemon, you had Pokemon Go just to try it out, just to have something that technology integrate with, the real world. And it can be things like that. I can see that easily being put into the music industry or DJing. It just hasn't been discovered yet. And plus, we're talking about it in the very early stages right now.
Right.
But soon these things are. I'm very confident that these things will soon be the norm.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I was super surprised at just how much I enjoyed the the party virtual reality concert. It looked like, those very sort of early video game type like the graphics and the movements of the avatar, but the actual being able to do stuff that you wouldn't normally do at a concert, right?
Right.
Getting onto the stage, getting behind the stage, looking at the quote unquote venue from a sort of bird's eye view. It was oddly engaging, actually. I mean, I sort of spent 45 minutes on it. I think they had several concerts throughout that weekend about 3 months ago. Nina, any thoughts on 5G, on virtual reality, on XD, augmented reality? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not very tech savvy, so I don't know the behind the scenes side of it. But as, again, like a fellow music lover, I think the thing with streaming and everything going digital and online is now this music and everything is so much more accessible to people around the world, which is a beautiful thing, right? We want to all share music with each other. We want to share these experiences. And a lot of times, if you don't grow up in a city and instead you're out in the suburbs, you don't get to experience that and whatnot. So I think adding that element through the digitalization now, and then taking that to a step forward with VR and such, to actually help people feel these things with their full bodies, visually, auditory, I think is going to be a game changer, and it's going to really I don't know what it'll be like, but I know that it's going to be something really great if it happens and when it happens.
Right. And I mean, like Matt said, I mean, there's so much I guess money being left on the table when you have a concert with 40 people, and yet you could also tap into an audience that cannot make it because of the capacity issue or because of the distance and location issue or timing issue. You can still, one level of ticket for in-person in real life, and another, several sets of price plans for those who can't make it or for those who want to watch it later, right? Matt,
right.
5G and virtual reality and all that.
I've got some thoughts.
And by the way, Matt, we have to talk about your Inaka idea again, because I don't think people quite grasp how awesome that is. But before we get to the Inaka, the countryside solutions you're providing us, let's talk about 5G and the next wave tech.
So there's two things, and actually, Nina, something you said factors into the first thing that I'll say is, so if you're making a concert in VR, and by that I mean, you know, there's a stage and then the band's on the stage and then there's avatars and, you know, the audience area and stuff like that. Like that's what you're doing and that's the experience. Like unless you have a full haptic bodysuit that will somehow mimic me getting punched or something like that, like I don't really care. And in fact, I've had arguments, well, I've had civil conversations on Reddit about this. It's a very interesting area, but from the, let's call it the traditional concert experience, it's lackluster to me. And this brings up a greater point, which is the second part, which is a physical concert that you attend at a physical space is one type of experience. And no matter what you do, VR, AR, what we're doing on Zoom, it's merely simulacrum, right? It looks similar to that experience over there, but it is not the same thing. And there's actually quite a few more opportunities for what you're able to do in that virtual space. And so what I was thinking, I had not thought this before, but as everybody was talking, what I was thinking, and kind of your experience specifically, John, about the party concert that you went to, what I was thinking about is, you know, if you had like a limited time, it's almost like Minecraft the concert, where you could log in for a 2-week period. That's the only period of time that the server even exists. And you go in, and instead of, you know, pretending to be in an audience, but you're in VR, it's merely like over here in that part of the world, the band's playing, but you can always hear the stuff. And then you run around and it's like a virtual scavenger hunt for digital tickets that you can redeem for like t-shirts or something like that. Like it's a video game at the concert, or maybe concert the video game.
Huh.
That might be kind of fun. I might enjoy that. But the thing, if I don't want to see a reproduction of what a concert in real life is in a digital form, because I think that those are actually two separate platforms that, while they are similar, they are not the same thing. And if you try to force one or the other to be the same, you're going to fall short no matter what.
Well, I suppose it's almost like the difference between esports and, like, you know, normal sports, right?
Yeah, kind of, which is why that name also bugs me.
They're not quite the same thing, but it's almost like a whole new industry has emerged in the
And we don't yet know what that is, like what the full breadth of that is, right? And so I think that, you know, if you look at esports, if you look at VR and what it's trying to do with music, it's indicative of kind of the baby stage that we're in right now, with actually understanding the full breadth of what the technology, what the experience, what the opportunities in front of us specifically with regards to that are. We don't yet know.
But didn't we have that already before, when we had something like Guitar Hero, where you would play, you know, guitar, you know, with, you know, online, and it was very successful because, you know, I think you could actually plug in some guitars, a real guitar. Yeah, they had, you know, plastic ones too, but, you know, that interaction proved to be extremely powerful. And I think they've created ones that you make a band virtually. This isn't new. And it's very much about gamification of music, right? That's what we're talking about. This is gamification, whether or not it's in Fortnite or doing, you know, Guitar Hero or something like that. And it's a very different way to look at it. Esports and sports maybe is a good analogy, because, you know, sports is very different than esports. They both have huge fan bases. Esports has already surpassed music as a moneymaker. It's massive. You can't argue with that, but it's a different animal. And I think understanding that as an artist is a good idea. You have this and you have this, you can combine them, but they might be different fan bases. Completely.
That's actually a huge issue that we're having right now with our specific scenes, is just kind of like understanding, I guess, and communication and education of like what it is we're actually after and what it is we're producing.
I suppose, you know, Matt, you were talking about how technology may not be the most, you know, forefront thought for a lot of people in your particular genre, right? But just thinking back to what Josh just said, I mean, I'm thinking of, for example, you know, J.K. Rowling, the author. I think it's true that she's the first billionaire writer. And a lot of her money, really, obviously she wrote great books, but came from like the brand extension. You know, you had the movies, and then you had like the theme parks. but a lot of writers, when they go into writing, they're not obviously thinking about theme parks, as a product at the end of their
That,
their,
that
their
actually,
series of novels.
that actually segues really good into the abandoned house thing. If you want to go into that,
That's what I was hoping you'd pick up on that, but yeah, go on. So, what's your brand extension here?
Well, and so if you haven't already been able to tell, like I'm really about the physical human experience, visual or visceral experience of live music in the flesh.
There's a clue in the image behind you. Yes, go ahead.
That's actually me stage diving.
Really?
Yeah, that's up in Sendai
Nice.
with a band called Napalm Death from Bristol, actually. But what was I saying? Oh, so the live house, I hate saying this. This is like the most, maybe not the most painful, but like it's definitely a painful thing to say, is the live house in Japan, in the US, in Britain, like worldwide, right, is that model is broken. It doesn't work in a pandemic, right? And especially with dirty underground, sweaty rock and roll, right? Like that's an excellent place to get the flu, right? And especially something like COVID-19. And so you can, if you want to do that, you can, but I would say that it's probably close to criminally negligible.
And you say pandemic, but also in case of a natural disaster. I mean, there's
Yeah.
more and more issues around climate change that can disrupt a weekend's performance. But sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, and so what we're proposing, what we're actually already working on, those going out into the middle of nowhere at what amounts to nascent infrastructure. So it's not necessarily dilapidated, but vacant properties that still have owners and it still has electricity and stuff, but it's just not being used. And that's where we want to do concerts. But the thing about physical concerts though is there's a lot of gear involved. There's PAs and amps and drum kits and all the soundboards and all that stuff, right? And so that's kind of also a logistical issue. That's expensive. That's not cheap, right? And so what we figured out though is because there are a number of venues that we are very, very close with. I wouldn't say that we're partnered, but like we work together quite frequently with. And they've got a whole bunch of gear that's just sitting there, right? What we've proposed is, what if we just like rent out a truck and then load your gear in Shinjuku into the truck and cart it out to Nikko in the middle of nowhere. And then we have a venue branded. It's not in the physical space of the venue that has a certain name, but it's a venue brand presents, Super Death Metal Fest Volume 1 presented by, Earthdom or El Puente or whatever Fever down in Shimokito.
Right. So these are almost like mini pop-up festivals.
Yeah, it's kind of, maybe that's a good way to think about it. We're still figuring it out, like as we go, exactly what this could look like. But the idea is what you're talking about with brand extension, right? Thus far, up until now, I would say probably for hundreds of years, like a venue's revenue has been tied to a single or maybe a few physical locations, but they have not been very mobile, right? Yeah. And so if you can start taking the curation and the clout that a venue has and the following that it's developed over years, and then just sort of direct it to pop-ups, as you were saying, that might be a really cool avenue for not only brand extension, but also revenue stream extension.
In other words, VAS, venue as a service.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that, but yes.
Because I'm guessing that there are all these like moments of latency where the venue is not being used, the equipment's sitting there, it's in between whatever concerts. That's an opportunity, right?
Oh yeah,
where they could loan out the equipment for your pop-up people to come and go and do a mini concert somewhere 2 hours away from Tokyo.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, with what we've been doing with Zyko, like we've got sound engineers in a car. We've loaded the amp. Like we know what that looks like in order to get the bare minimum or the MVP of it out somewhere. And it's one van. That's what you need. Of course, it's not a light show and lasers and all of this stuff, but again, it's a concert for like 30-some people. And so as a brand extension, that to me is just like super exciting. Like honestly, I don't even care if there's money in it. I just want to go all over the place and listen to kick-ass music.
I'm totally down with that. I mean, I can imagine, you know, a group of friends, you know, 20 or 30 people going on a long weekend picnic somewhere, and, you know, needing a DJ and a band, you know, perhaps Nina's band, and you know, Ken playing, and we can, you know, create a, you know, page on Zyko.
Yeah, exactly, right? And exactly, right? Because if it's only 30 people to be safe, or 20 people, right? But you're also streaming it, there's those revenue streams.
And we've all tested ourselves for COVID before we actually board the bus.
Yeah, and then it also is way more attractive now too, because people are like, wait, what are you doing? You're like in a bus going to an abandoned house for is that a squat concert you're going, like, what are you doing?
Right.
So it's very like confusing but attractive at the same time.
Why not? I mean, I remember when I was an English teacher in Ibaraki, we would take these like mini, you know, teacher sort of camping sort of trips. You know, we were in Ibaraki and we sort of drive up to like Tochigi or to Gunma, you know, go, you know, hiking.
Well, right, so you can have a whole experience around it too, because it's so far outside of the city. Necessarily, it needs to be an overnight, which means you can make a weekend of it, which means you can go hiking or surfing or diving or like whatever else you want to do, and then have a barbecue and a concert.
Right.
Which sounds awesome.
And if there was, yeah, sorry, Nina, go on.
I just imagine it being kind of like a boiler room set where everyone's dancing behind the DJs and it's getting live streamed. But yeah, like maybe even like the abandoned homes, the homes like themselves have like lodging space, so it's all combined.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you go 1 hour out of Tokyo, or even probably less, you'll find all these abandoned elementary schools and junior high schools, which are now being converted into what do you call them, like motels or
like hostels kind of,
hostels,
and like workshops.
Right.
Yeah.
And these are perfect because, you know, these schools normally have like, you know, football grounds or baseball grounds. They have actual grounds around the school, and the school is somewhat separated from the main community. It's like on a hill somewhere, or usually on a kind of hill.
It'll have to have Matt's music playing there.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so you can really go wild, you know, like out in what was an abandoned school that's now being used by a bunch of 50 ravers.
I'm totally riffing on this now, but you could eventually, if it works well enough and it gets kind of established, you could eventually just have literally roving bands of bands that never stop touring, and they're just constantly going to various abandoned buildings and streaming and having barbecues.
I think Zyko needs to get into this real fast.
We'll put anything on. We'll put anything on. I mean, yeah, we've done events in the countryside before. That Nina was involved in one called M-Fest that we, you know, put on as a stream, which is in Miyoko.
Oh, I think I saw that on. Did you post that, Nina? On
yeah, and I was live streaming on the Instagram page, and we were live streaming via Zyko as well. So yeah,
it's cool.
It's really awesome.
What was that? Just like a sort of festival out in the woods?
Yeah, it was at a ski resort at a ski hill. So since there's no snow, you know, it was a great venue space, and it was a 2-day festival with art and workshops, and very spacious. It wasn't overtly crowded like Fuji Rock or whatnot, so it felt very safe, and it was it was just out in the nature. So it's great.
Are there any questions coming in from people watching that are interested in what we're doing?
Oh yes. By the way, I should have mentioned that before. If there's you know, anybody out there with a burning question, just, you know, drop them on Millennials of Tokyo Facebook or even Instagram, and, you know, somebody will pick it up along the way. As we're towards the last sort of 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes, what are your expectations for the future? Okay, so 2020, what is it? It's like November. 2020 is almost over. When do you anticipate we'll get back to so-called normal? I mean, there are various, you know, vaccines. I think Pfizer, the pharma company and other companies have all talked about very effective vaccines coming on board, and from what I understand, they're not really going to be in sort of general use for the entire population until maybe the summer of next year. So we're looking at the earliest, I think, the summer of next year, 2021, when people will begin to feel confident enough to really engage, because there are therapeutics and there are vaccines that will be available. When do you, all in your various industries, are you seeing signs already of people coming back to events? Maybe we can start with the corporate man again, Josh.
This is a layered question. I think, vaccine being available and people taking a vaccine are two different things. I think this is a much longer trail than people realize. Right. Locally in Japan, we're seeing life come back. I think still clubs and live houses are still ostracized as places where people can get corona. I don't think that it's going to shut down again. However, if we're talking about international travel, international tours, it's going to be a long time, because the way that tours work, if your audience doesn't know, it's usually done by multiple countries that pay for an artist to come over between promoters in different places that have they call it a landed fee. So they pay, the artist travels around different places and stays one night, goes to the next place, and it's a shared cost for this. So it makes it okay to bring someone over to Asia. Otherwise, it would be way too expensive in Australia, and they go to every country. And so you have two issues. One, you have different countries and different places will have different regulations on people coming in. Do they have to spend 14 days in somewhere, or do they have to, that already makes it too expensive to bring people over. And then you have country to country. If there's a breakout during an event or during a tour and they can't go to one country, how does that work? And what are the insurance implications of this? I think it's travel in itself, as it's an industry like entertainment that's been devastated by this. And it's going to be very hard to see where the value is, because it's very expensive to bring artists over for live events, and you only put them up for a day or two before they go somewhere else, and then that cost is shared. There's no way you can put someone up for 14 days in each of these places. Then an artist wouldn't want to do that. So it's going to be a while, I think. People like AEG and Live Nation, the two big players in the world of owning the whole value chain of artists, from the ticketing companies like Ticketmaster, which is Live Nation, and promotions, and they also own all of the venues. They want regular events to come back because they own the whole value chain, but it's going to be very hard. That's the reality. It doesn't matter when the vaccine comes out. Every country has to be in agreement that travel between works. And when we get to that point, then we'll start to see people come over, or ticket prices will just be insane. But local shows will come back by next summer, I think.
Yeah. Matt, the alternative music scene, what's the prognosis on that?
To just kind of immediately comment on what Josh was talking about right now, with what Kaala does with tourism, even prior to Corona, is actually the opposite of what music or going on tour looks like. As Josh said, it's immensely expensive and just outstandingly risky, even in kind of the best of times, to send a band on tour. There's any number of fail points that just like that can mess everything up, right? And so our concept and what we've executed on is don't send the band on tour, send the audience on tour, right? And kind of similarly, and this, I mean, again, this is what we were doing with our travel company. And so we take groups of 8 or so people, and in fact, we had a lot of honeymooners, which was really unexpected. But sending the fans, or at least people interested in a specific genre, or maybe not even a genre, they're just like, oh, I've always wanted to go to Japan, and why not go see a bunch of death metal or grindcore or whatever, right? And so, I mean, that's not to say that that's an easy lift itself. It's definitely still complex, but you know, we're starting to hear about how the Tokyo Olympics 2020 is going to let all the athletes come in without any kind of quarantine period and things like that. I'm not saying that's a good idea, totally not endorsing it. But there might be other ways to kind of retool the system or the model that allows, probably, no matter what, it's probably not a lot of people, but it might be possible if you, you know, kind of flip the bit and, you know, or flip the script rather, and sort of explore with other things. I think, again, local music, it's I can't say that it's surviving, but it's, or rather thriving. It's not dead. There are a few concerts per month. Usually they have a self-imposed max cap of about 20. They're socially distanced, like all of these things. The pricing has not changed, nor have the costs. So necessarily operating at a bigger loss than they were previously. That could, I feel like that'll probably persist. Personally speaking, and professionally, I'm still on the fence on how I feel about that, especially in city centers. I think probably I lean more towards, as much as I want these things to happen, that's it's not even a risk of like, oh, you're going to stub your toe. It's literally, you might die. And also kill your grandparents or whatever. I think that's not very responsible. And so that needs figured out. But I think that'll be an ongoing conversation. I think another important thing that I hear occasionally, but I don't feel like I hear it as much as I'd like to, is that, like most things, this is totally a process, right? And the whole new normal thing, like, get that idea out of my face, right? We are in flux right now. We are in process right now. We are iterating right now. This is not the final destination, nor is this the beginning. This is a process that we're in. And so I think we're probably going to see one of two things. You're going to see people hunkering down, and you're already seeing that. And then you're going to see people like everybody kind of present tonight who are exploring with maybe new ideas, new concepts, new methods of organization, and new methods of expression, right? Because it's not the case that things are, like, we're not dealing with a binary. We're not dealing with, oh, it's either live music's in person and in the flesh, or it's Zyko or VR or whatever. It's, no, these are two totally interesting things that people, generally speaking, like. You don't have to choose one or the other. It's just, how do you implement them, and what does that look like? And so I think the experimentation and exploration of kind of what, like, nascent opportunities in what kind of expressive or creative expression looks like, I guess. Is that an answer?
Yeah, for sure. That's great. And Ken, what's your thought of, you know, I mean, you're a DJ, but you're also in the military, so maybe you have some insights, and the rest of us don't. When do you think things will be back to normal, so-called normal?
I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I don't see things going back to normal. I just see us having to adapt to the new conditions that they set based off of coronavirus being active. I don't see us going back to, I see those things being memories of, you know, things you tell your kids, what it used to be like to stand next to somebody, things like, just to look at the psychological effect this has on people. You walk down the street, and if you don't have a mask on, people avoid you as if you have the plague. So it's messing with our psyche as well, and it's this whole thing has had stressful effects on a lot of people. With the whole military thing, it's not hitting us as hard as I've seen it back in the States. Back in the States, more people, economically speaking. Me personally, I don't know anybody who has coronavirus or anybody who's died of it. I don't know anybody personally. For me, to be honest, coronavirus only exists when I turn the TV on. When I turn it off, and I go outside, you can't tell me where it's at. I can't find it. But as things, and when you said the whole thing about the Pfizer, it's very convenient that the Pfizer information came out after elections, after the certain side that, Democrats won. After Democrats won, they said, oh yeah, we just found a vaccine's 90% effective rate. So this whole thing seems to be political, power move, power grab, and they're using the medical as a device to affect everybody. They're not using missiles no more. They're using medical, and it's very effective because it's affecting everybody across the world. Everybody across the world. Now, the whole thing with the whole issue with the mask thing, you see this. They create this divide of, because I don't wear my mask. I stay 6 feet away from people. I keep my distance. But I don't wear a mask. I just make sure. I just tell people this: you just have a good diet. Your food is either helping you or not helping you. And in the winter season, when flu season comes up, during the same time, you have a pandemic that classifies anything in flu-like symptoms during the flu season. It's very likely that it's going to spike.
Right.
So do I see things going back to normal? To be honest, no. I just see them change. It'd be like how after 9/11, airline policy changed, and it was continuous. It didn't stop. It didn't end. It was just new conditions set in place for people to abide by. That's the same thing I see with coronavirus. There's new conditions that's going to be set in place for people to abide by. Like, for example, when you talk about the vaccine, I can see vaccine cards coming out. You can't come into the store unless you got a vaccine card. Or you can't travel unless you got your vaccine card. And that's how you would mandate everybody to take the vaccine for those that choose not to. Right. So you wouldn't be able to go certain places, just like there's certain places you can't go without masks. There'll be certain places you can't go without the vaccine. So that's my point of view on it.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, there's a whole political side to this issue that people often talk about. And Nina, what's your thought about when we're gonna get back to life as it was before BC, before Corona?
I definitely agree with Ken that I don't think we'll ever go back to what it was before. However it was, everyone does feel differently mentally. I do know that things like live shows will come back and whatnot, especially after the vaccine is out. It might take years though until people do feel safe to go back and whatnot. But in saying that, as we've all been talking about today, like, I think there's so much potential and opportunity in how our world has changed so rapidly in the last, what, 8 months now, 9 months. I think, I think that we've already seen a lot of people change in a positive light and, come up with new business ideas and whatnot. And so the music industry is going to, like Josh is doing, like everybody's doing, is going to start seeing the potential and the opportunities that arise from this to continue our love for music with each other and whatnot. That being said, like Japan is a different story than like US and Europe and whatnot, right? Like we are already seeing more live shows come back. Like Josh mentioned, like M Festival, we hosted that in October this year. And we were able to do it safely. So the fact that we are able to do those, maybe Japan being the second largest music market in the world, like I think this is a great place to be as people involved in the music industry. And I think we can somehow be more of a leading country in what other countries can do in the future of music. So I see a lot of excitement in that, and excited to see what everybody does with this.
No, for sure. I remember reading a story about a platform that was launched in Japan to support small businesses, especially restaurants and bars. Um, and what it was you could go onto this website and you could download like a photograph of your favorite restaurant or your favorite bar. So let's say your restaurant was part of this campaign or your favorite bar was part of this campaign, and you could go onto the website, download for like 500 yen an image of your favorite restaurant or bar, and that money would be a kind of donation to that restaurant or bar. This was at a time during lockdown where we couldn't actually go to restaurants or bars. And so I can't remember which company it was as well. I think it was Userbase or something that had launched this very innovative, very simple service. And people were donating, 500 yen here, 500 yen there to their favorite bar. And I think you could redeem that donation maybe for a drink or something, or maybe to just be a sort of a complete donation. I think that kind of innovation, that kind of like, agile, fast thinking, trying to find a solution to a problem is something that, we've all, seen with like Zyko and, in the case of, Ken and I and some friends trying to live stream from someone's apartment. And in the case of, Matt with his Inaka idea, I love it. I think what excites me about, this crappy time that we're in right now is that, people constantly trying to find solutions to problems. And, I find that as somebody who's written about startups and someone who's interested in creativity and innovation, endlessly inspiring to find, to hang out with people who are constantly finding not just problems, but solutions to problems. Anyway, I think we've almost run out of time. A quick apology to everybody. We were planning on doing a live stream to YouTube as well, which we normally do, but we've had some tech issues today. And I think that's why we didn't have so many questions come through. But for those who can actually send us questions that based on what you've listened to, we will do our best to answer them anyway. We'll make sure that they reach the right people. And of course, don't forget to look at our event page. All the details are there for all our speakers and also how to reach them. Lastly, just want to say thank you so much to everybody for attending. Thank you to Josh at Zyko. You guys are awesome. Thanks to Matt, Kaala, you're amazing. DJ Kenster, can't wait to do some Afrobeat with you soon. And Nina, my able co-host, last word goes to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you all for joining. All the audience members for joining. I've been reading the comments and we've got some cool discussions already going. So definitely check that out and hopefully we can continue with this conversation in the future. And thank you so much for the speakers. Again, thank you.
Thank you. Had a great time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks
for watching.
All right.